Coming through.
Lekker hè? Jeroen!
Gerne schön.
Alright, this is an entry from Sensi Seed, Silver Pearl. It smells like shit.
Yeah, a few of them does.
You know?
A few of them you can get
Super
really
fertilizer. I am telling you right now that I'm supporting the non-fertilized weed, the bios versus the hydros. I think it's a warrior.
Which ones?
Bio versus hydro. There's so few bios.
Yeah.
So many hydros. If they don't say bio, I assume it's a hydro. And hydros all smell and taste alike. That's, I have to say, that's the Germanization
that
of Dutch
greenhouse.
pot. Talking about the Aryan race.
Hello. Hello. Welcome to day 2 of the Cannabis Cup, brought to you by High Times Magazine, and thanks to Milk Veg. I'm Steve Bloom, music editor of High Times, and just in a few seconds you will be witnessing a terrific panel about the medical marijuana issue, medical rights. Today is Bob Marley Day here at the Cannabis Cup. Rita Marley is here. She'll be here later on tonight, and she will be performing. Alright, so come here later on for Bob Marley Day tribute celebration. But right now I want to introduce to you the new editor-in-chief of High Times Magazine, a great friend of mine. And when I was news editor of High Times, Peter Gorman kept coming into my office and telling me story after story after story of things that we needed to write about in High Times that are happening all over the country. The crimes of the drug war, and he especially decided to focus on the medical issue. Peter has written more stories about medical marijuana than anybody in the United States and probably around the world. He is the foremost expert on our staff on this subject. I want to welcome to you Peter Gorman.
All lies. Hi. Hi. Thanks all of you for coming. I think today's panel is going to be pretty interesting. I've got Art Lessès, who's from America but is now working with Mara Farm over here. I've got Mishka, who works out of France and has been fighting the battle for medical marijuana over there for a number of years. I've got J.P. Morgan, who's writing a book on medical marijuana here out of Holland. And I've got Glaucoma Jim, an activist out of Arizona, who's been working on this subject and is a medical marijuana user himself. So I think it's going to be good. I'm just going to make a few minutes worth of remarks, and then I'm going to pass the mic on. We'll all take turns, and then we're going to ask you for questions. Some of you have been approaching some of us as we've been wandering around the last day or two, and we haven't always had the time to answer medical questions. Today is the day. All the time we want. You know, when I first came to High Times, it was 1986. I wrote a story or two for Steve Hager, who was the editor-in-chief, and who's the man completely behind this Cannabis Cup. And then the first assignment he gave me was, Peter, do a story on medical marijuana. I said, what do you mean medical marijuana? He said, well, how about marijuana and health? And I looked at him and I said, Steve, I mean, you don't really want me to do that story, because if I do it and I find out there are some problems with marijuana and health, I'll only do it on the condition that you'll print what I find if you verify it. And I didn't know how Steve would take it. I'd never actually talked to an editor-in-chief that way. And he said, this is a demand for a story. And in fact, he said, okay, whatever you find, we'll print. And I spent probably 4 months working on the story of marijuana and health. I thought I was going to come up with at least something that was going to be particularly negative about marijuana's connection with the human body. I read thousands and thousands of abstracts and hundreds of articles. I actually had to, it was kind of like taking a college course in chemistry. To understand the articles, you had to learn the chemistry behind them. Well, I was astounded to find, after months of work, and I'm not kidding, it was really 24 hours a day for months, I was astounded to discover there are no ill effects from marijuana to health. A cough is about all you can come up with. It really is about all you can come up with. I was even more startled to find that what I'd been told by my doctor when my own mom was dying, which was, you know, get your mom some pot if you don't want her on a morphine drip. And at the time I had just brushed them off. I was 13 years old and I didn't know anything about that. But I was surprised to find that there had been hundreds of studies that did involve marijuana as medicine. And during the course of this, I mean, there were things like marijuana as medicine by the Institute of Health. Done, you know, it was Joe Califano, who's now head of CADCA up at Columbia, who's rabidly anti-marijuana, particularly anti-marijuana in health, who had suggested this study to Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter did it. When it was ready, Ronald Reagan had come into office, and the study was simply suppressed. The study results were, the study done by the Institute of Medicine was a study of all of the studies ever done on marijuana and humans. And they investigated things like ruining your immune system, or second generational, third generational problems from chromosome damage. And the study simply rebuked everything that had been said negatively about marijuana and the human body. And it went on to say, at the time, when it was finally published by the National Academy of Sciences in '82, it went on to say that there were minimally 14 physical ailments that marijuana would help. Now for us, I'm sure you guys are a very educated audience. You know all about glaucoma and cancer and the wasting issue. What we need to find out is, how can we get the mainstream to actually begin understanding this? And I'm afraid, after years and years of hammering away and doing the best I know how to do, and these people have all been hammering away as well, I'm afraid it's going to end up being like the AIDS epidemic, when AIDS wasn't taken seriously enough until everybody in the US knew somebody, or knew somebody who knew somebody. I hope that we haven't got to wait quite that long for this issue to be taken seriously. I do know that in our country, some states, when California decides to go ahead and pass a proposition to allow it, the federal government turns to Virginia and tries to get rid of their medical marijuana defense. Arizona passes 200, and then the federal government went after the Ohio defense. The result is I hope, going to approach a critical mass in the not too distant future. I mean, the cacophony and the craziness of, in this state it's okay, and in Oklahoma you got 93 years for 56 plants, doesn't work. That Dennis Perone is allowed to sell his marijuana and should on the state level, but is still being harassed for having had the Buyers Club prior to 215, and technically faces an awful long jail term, although I don't think he'll get it because he's Dennis Perone and he's too high profile, is just insane. It's got to stop, and you guys are probably ground zero in stopping it. I'm sure you're doing all the educating you can. Well, Todd's another one. Yeah, I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds of people in peculiar situations where they're, you know, giving medical marijuana to people and they find themselves going to jail. Or in Oregon, where one Buyers Club got mad at another Buyers Club and began to drop dimes on them to the police, until 8 people who were providers at one of the clubs ended up either losing their property, their homes, their jobs, or doing jail time. The issue really is about, is marijuana medicine? And the answer is, marijuana is good medicine. Now, I think the reason the fight stays in place is because the whole drug war stands on the legs of marijuana. If you minus marijuana from the drug war equation, no one in America would fund a war that costs $15 billion for the federal level alone annually for a couple of million people who've got a temporary problem that they're over their heads with hard drugs. No one would. It only stays funded as long as they can add in the 15 or 20 million regular marijuana smokers. And of course the fear people have is that, or the fear the government has, is that if marijuana is allowed to be used by those of us who have problems and by those people who need it medically, and then the lies are exposed, those medical users don't become instant crackheads completely out of control. If those people don't stop functioning the way the government claims, if there is no brain damage, immune damage, damage to their children, if in fact the lies are exposed because people are allowed to use marijuana medicinally, then the whole country is liable to turn around and say, wait a minute, if they didn't go crazy, why am I believing that he would go crazy? And there, the drug war falls apart. It's not the reason we fight for medical marijuana. It would be a side effect. I am certainly a legalizer. I'm not hiding behind anybody's wheelchair to legalize marijuana. But those of us in the movement, a lot of us in the movement, realize that people with medical conditions don't have any more time to wait. None, not even a week, not a month. They can't do 1 week in jail. That the drug war would also crumble is simply a side effect. But there's honesty in trying to get access to medical marijuana among all of us. And anybody who's thought the issue through certainly knows it. The only people who don't, you know, are the press people for the federal government and for some local governments. I hope we can come to, hope we can get some good insights today into what's happening elsewhere around the globe, or even in our own country. Now I'd like to turn the mic over to Art Lesses, who's going to tell us about what's happening here in the Netherlands.
Well, I'm going to talk about a few of the things that are happening here in the Netherlands. There's a lot of different things going on, of course. Marifarm is an organization that I work for. It's a non-profit organization, and we distribute about 3 kilograms per month of medical marijuana to over 250 pharmacies throughout Holland. That's about 10% of the pharmacies throughout Holland. Now, that's a pure and simple fact. We've been doing that for 2 years. We haven't had the kind of horrible side effects that you mentioned that might happen. Fortunately, none of the patients that I know of have gone crazy or experienced any really negative consequences. One of the interesting things about the whole controversy about medical marijuana is what he had mentioned, what Peter had mentioned about hiding behind the wheelchair. And we're not doing that. You can prove that by coming here to Holland, because you may have noticed that marijuana is relatively freely available here in Holland. If you decide that you want to smoke marijuana for therapeutic purposes and you got money or you got space where you can grow, or you got really nice friends, you get all the therapeutic marijuana that you want right here in Holland. But you gotta have money, and you gotta have space, or you gotta have friends. There's a difference between therapeutic use of marijuana and what you're allowed to do here in Holland, and medicalized marijuana, rather than medical, I think medicalized might be a better term. As far as therapeutic use goes, you are allowed to use marijuana therapeutically in Holland if that's what you want to do. I mean, I would just define therapeutic use as doing marijuana because it makes you feel better in some way, that you prefer it to a non-marijuana condition. Under those circumstances, I think the evidence that we have of self-reports, and in particular people continuing to use therapeutic marijuana under conditions of extreme persecution, I think provides us all the evidence that we really need. Good marijuana is very easy to get in Holland, and they won't even make you prove that you're not doing it just for fun. I mean, I love this country, and it's really amazing the difference. You're going to hear stories about other countries where they throw people in jail for using medical marijuana. Barbaric. Nonetheless, why do I complain still? I try not to complain because I'm a guest here, but nonetheless, I must complain about the situation regarding medical marijuana here in Holland. First of all, before I do that, I got to compare the US and Dutch systems very briefly. For instance, you all know the US system, or at least many of you know the US system, and I'm just going to let it go with that. Here in Holland, if you are a regular patient and you are seeing your regular huisarts, I don't pronounce that very well, but nonetheless, you have a doctor in your neighborhood. This doctor knows you and knows what kind of person you are and knows what you do and what kind of illnesses you have and what you need. And if in Holland, if this physician has the intestinal fortitude to write you a prescription for marijuana, you can take that prescription to a variety of pharmacies, only 10% of them, because this too requires a significant degree of intestinal fortitude on the part of the pharmacist. But nonetheless, you can take it and you can get a prescription for marijuana filled. Now this, in terms of a philosophy, I took just enough philosophy to mess me up for the rest of my life, but I'm pretty sure that in general, oh boy, that bombed so badly I forgot my next line. Well, anyway. Oh yes, I remember. Sorry. The availability of marijuana. You have your own pharmacist. You have your own physician. These are the individuals who decide that marijuana is appropriate for you. The only thing that's missing here in Holland is that they need somebody to provide medical grade marijuana to the pharmacies. And that's where MariPharm comes in. They don't want us to do this. They would prefer, the government would prefer that individuals who use marijuana therapeutically, for the time being anyway, they would prefer that they buy it at coffee shops. This is a very contradictory response on the part of the government because they tell us that we have a number of problems with our marijuana, and we think those problems are only worse in the coffee shops. And I'll get to those. Simply put, if you have medicalized marijuana, you enable people to get their medicine within the context of their usual physician, pharmacist, and patient triad, right? You got three people involved with this. They know what's going on. We don't make the decisions. We don't recommend marijuana to anybody as far as the business goes. We don't have to. Medical marijuana sells itself. People come here from very far away to try to get some. Now, there's a number of problems the government says with medical grade marijuana. They don't like us to use the whole plant. There are other companies, there are other countries in the United States, for instance, you can get synthetic THC in pill form for certain kinds of disorders. They insist that this is superior. Part of the reason they say this is because they say most of the research has been conducted with synthetic THC. I used to do research in the United States with drugs. They make it very difficult for you to do research with marijuana in a laboratory. I did research with PCP and cocaine and amphetamine and morphine, but marijuana was a different story. They wouldn't let me work with that in the laboratory. They talk about variations in plant products. One of the things we do at Maori Farm is we have one particular plant. Many people say that you should have more plants. I agree with that. We should have many kinds of plants. But what the government says is the only thing we know that works is THC. So we say we have marijuana that is high in THC and low in the other cannabinoids. Non-existent levels in most cases. I can prove that. I analyze the marijuana inside the laboratory. They don't care. They say that there's too much variation in marijuana, yet they recommend that people go to coffee shops where there's more variation. We have one plant, a clone, and we grow from that clone. I've never seen it. I don't know where the growing is done. All I know is they give me little samples every now and then, and I analyze them. I analyze the different samples, every charge that goes through. I have some handouts you can get later on. You can take a look at this. Another thing we're very interested in is the issue of smokable marijuana versus the whole plant in other forms. I personally have no problem with, under some circumstances, providing people marijuana in edible form, in brownies, or in tea. For many of the MS patients in Holland prefer to take their marijuana in tea form. I don't know that that's particularly more effective, but with the negative experience we've had with chronic tobacco smoking, I understand some people have a prejudice against smoking as a method of delivering a therapeutic substance. I think that is only a prejudice, and we're working with a vaporizer, and many people are aware of the vaporizer. We want to find out how we can make that as safe as possible. There's three things I want you to remember, because I know it's hard to remember things when you're visiting here in Holland. One of them is that anybody with money, space, talent, and or really nice friends can have superb therapeutic marijuana without any fear of government intervention. I mean, if you decide to grow so much that you're going to sell it to other people, then you're taking a risk. But growing it on your own, at less than 5 plants, no timers on your lights, that sort of thing, you can be completely legal and get therapeutic marijuana here in Holland. Being legal otherwise here in Holland, it can be a problem for people. It's hard to get a job. Patients with illnesses, especially regular patients with illnesses, can get prescriptions for marijuana here in Holland, and those prescriptions can be filled. But sometimes, for some people, for irregular patients, read that as Americans visiting here, it can be very difficult to find a physician who's willing to write you a prescription for medical marijuana. They don't know you. I've been here for quite some time. I have found a physician that I had to visit 3 or 4 times and pay for out of my own pocket, and I've had records sent over from the United States. It's been an expensive process. I finally got a prescription for medical marijuana. I can't get it filled. I go to the pharmacies. My regular pharmacy is afraid to do it because I'm not terminal. I have chronic back pain. They're afraid to do it. My particular pharmacy. Other pharmacies don't know me. I work for Maori Farm and I can't get my prescription filled. So please don't come to me and say that you need me to help you get medical marijuana here in Holland, because it's very difficult to do. You have to establish yourself as a Dutch person, more or less. You have to be involved with the insurance. You have to have all of that, and even then it's not easy. The point is, it can be done. Finally, the final point I want to make is that nearly everybody has to pay for their medical grade marijuana. Some of you may not find that so reprehensible. I think it's horrible. We have a situation here in Holland where insured people don't normally have to pay for their medicines, and yet most people do have to pay for their marijuana because the government won't acknowledge marijuana as a therapeutic compound. As a result, Maori Farm keeps the price of its marijuana very low. I won't tell you how low. Low enough that I don't make much money. That's okay. Nonetheless, we're subsidizing this thing effectively. We sell it extremely low. The pharmacists make a significant markup, and then they sell it to the people. There is an insurance company here in Holland, a private insurance company that you can get that will supplement your regular insurance, and that will cover 80% of the cost of marijuana. One company. This is wonderful. There are also a few individuals, we won't mention any names or anything, but these people are very ill, and they're very obstinate, and they're very Dutch. and they tell their government, I'm not going to pay for this. And there are a few people who are getting it paid for by the government. But in general, most people still pay for it by themselves. That's why we want to have more of a medicalized marijuana situation here in Holland. Therapeutic marijuana you can get, we want it more medicalized so it's cheaper and safer and more freely available for people who really need it. Thank you.
Next in the batter's box is Mishka from France.
Hello. Or shall I say bonjour? Bonjour. So, okay. My name is Mishka. I'm French. I come from this very, very bad country that has put so much pressure on the Dutch government to change their so-called laxist policy. Well, I do my best back where I come from, so I put as much pressure as I can, so the French government doesn't put so much pressure on the Dutch government. And some of you, I've heard, I think of a trial that I was involved, that I was in. I was tried a year ago, and in a way, it ties up with this medical marijuana issue. When Peter was saying a while ago that when he started looking into medical marijuana, he discovered that hundreds and hundreds of studies had been made, and that most of them showed that marijuana was okay and posed no problem to health. So the same happened to me when I worked on my first book. My books are in French, I'm sorry to say at this point. The next one will be in English. So when I worked on my first book in 1978, I discovered, like you did, that so many studies had been done. Yet there were a few studies that said things like chromosome damage, your immune system going down. There were a number of things like this coming up, and the interesting thing was that most of these originated from very few people, and there was one person in particular who did a great job of giving a lot of publicity to those studies, most of which are very poorly done studies that really don't prove anything to any scientist that puts his mind to it. This man, the man who was very successful in getting those studies to the media, his name is Gabriel Nehas. He's an anti-marijuana crusader, and he's the man who tried me. I was sued for libel. But anyway, so the situation in France at this point is that most people still believe this sort of stories and are very confused because they've had so much propaganda, and most people don't really know at this point the difference between heroin and marijuana in France. It's just barely beginning to change. But the law as it stands in France now, and you will see that it doesn't leave much scope for medical marijuana, is that you can be charged for just smoking marijuana. Not possession, not growing, not importing, just smoking marijuana, and the maximum sentence you can get for that is 5 years jail, just for smoking. Also, you can get into trouble for presenting drugs in a favorable light. So if you say anything good about marijuana, like, as Peter said, he said, and I think it's a good thing to say, you said I'm a legalizer. Well, so am I. I'm a legalizer, and it's really important for people to realize that legalization is one issue and medical marijuana is another, and indeed we have to do something about medical marijuana because it works for people who really need it, and those two issues are really separate. And where was I going? Oh yes. Presenting drugs sous un jour favorable is the wording. So if you say anything good about marijuana, you can also get 5 years jail. So of course this is the law, and the law is one thing and how it's applied is another. And thank God we don't have minimum sentences in France. These are maximum sentences, so most people don't go to jail. It's been estimated, the latest estimate has just come out, that there are 2 million regular smokers of marijuana in France out of a population of 55 million, and another 7 million who smoke occasionally. So it's a lot of people. Well, out of these, some do end up being charged just for smoking, for usage. And last year, for instance, you had about 850 people who actually went to jail, short terms, but still they went to jail for just smoking marijuana. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it takes some really courageous people to get anything done. I'm going to tell you, though, a couple of stories which you'd be happy to hear about courageous people doing things in France. And before I tell you these stories, another thing I want to tell you is that, as far as I'm concerned, this country, the Netherlands, really stands out, of course, for its policies on drugs, but it stands out on other things as well. And one thing it stands out for, and it's very close to my heart for that, and it has been for many years, is that it has a unique policy on birth. And of all the industrialized countries, it's the country with the lowest death rate at birth for the mother or the child. There is no country in the world where births happen as well as they do here. And so the interesting thing is, how did the Dutch do this? Well, they did it by doing exactly the reverse of what every industrialized nation is doing. They did it not by providing more technological support for birth, but by providing a system whereby women who want to can have their baby born at home. And by doing that, they have the best result for birth of any Western countries. And I think that's something very important. And besides, it ties up with our subject, because as you possibly know, all the obstetrics manual up to the 50s, I would say, or well, perhaps earlier in different countries, but up around that time, they recommended that old medicine, cannabis, to help with birth. And Stephen Gaskin, perhaps, that I know of, have used have smoked marijuana at birth, because it sounds so much like an old hippie dream, not like a real medical help. But I can tell you one happy story. I did say I was going to tell you a few happy stories that come from France. So this is the story of a girl named Véronique, and her friends call her Véro. And she used to be a heroin addict, and she discovered marijuana, and she went off heroin and became a marijuana smoker. And she's been doing very well for a couple of years, and HIV positive, and went to Morocco for a holiday. And he had, the wasting syndrome, when people lose a lot of weight and they have nausea and they can't eat. And they're very weak to begin with, so if they don't eat, it gets worse and worse. And he was in this sort of situation, and he went to Morocco for a holiday, and he smoked some hash. And much to his surprise, he discovered that he was putting on weight. And so he wanted to bring back some of this wonderful stuff with him. But he was stopped by the custom in coming back into France. And so we have this lawyer in France called Francis Caballero, who defended this man, and the other case I'm telling you about, the one whose marriage was saved. And so they put up a trial, and medical use, and that was the first time almost that medical use got into the news in France. Okay, so this now goes back to 3 years perhaps, and since then we've had Proposition 215, and because this is a global war, we have to think that all the countries that are in it, they're really like different fronts, and so what happens on one front has effect on what happens on the other front. And the fact that Prop 215 was passed in California has made a difference, quite a difference in France, because it was reported. And so now there is more of an ear for this sort of thing. So a number of, I know of 2 actions. There are 2 non-profit organizations in France that are trying to change the law. I belong to both, of course. And I know that both are beginning to get underway. A big, some action that will get media attention, which will entail a number of patients coming to Holland to get their medicine and taking it back with journalists into France. So I can't tell you much more about this right now because it's at the early stage of selecting the patients with the right profile. Because if you want to let people know about these things, you have to select the right people to do it. What else am I going to tell you? This is it, I think.
Thanks, Stephen Gasson.
The controversy that's going on about marijuana, medical marijuana in the Netherlands, and I would like to re-emphasize that it is illegal to grow marijuana in the Netherlands for any reason.
Without a permit.
I don't really know of anyone who has a permit. Hortifarm did have a permit, but that expired in October, I believe, October, not this year. The government has denied Hortifarm's application for a renewal of this permit, but they have gone into hoger beroep. They've appealed it, and we don't know what's going to happen yet. I just saw some people here from Hortifarm. I'll get an update myself. This country is walking a tightrope regarding its marijuana policies in general and the toleration of soft drugs and the other approach, the alternative approach it has to the drug abuse problem in general. And in the last couple of years, French President Jacques Chirac has tried to make the Dutch government feel isolated among nations because it is not interested in putting anybody in prison who smokes marijuana. And he accuses all the Dutch coffee shops of getting all the French teenagers hooked on hard drugs. And he perpetuates the lie that hard drugs are sold in the coffee shops here. And because of that, this has had the effect of a very chilling effect on the Dutch government's ability to recognize marijuana as a medicine. And they don't want to be regarded as fools either, so they are taking a very cautious approach about it. Like a lot of things in the Netherlands, it may not be legal, but it is being tolerated. In July '97, this year, the chief inspector for pharmacology and medical technology wrote to all the Dutch pharmacies and all the Dutch doctors stating that marijuana was prohibited to prescribe or provide medical marijuana because the Dutch Council on Health has determined, the Gezondheidsraad has determined that, quote, marijuana has no scientifically established provable effect.
Hey.
But still, and pharmacies and doctors who provide it are risking being called before the Medical Disciplinary Board. And but nevertheless, pharmacies would like to be able to provide this drug. Mevrouw Say de Roos, who's a spokesperson for the Royal Dutch Society for the Promotion of Pharmacology, that's called the KNMP in the Dutch. They don't really think that it will go that far. That the Department of Justice is the one who decides if anyone will be prosecuted. And to my knowledge, and I read the Dutch newspapers all the time, no one has been prosecuted, and they don't think they will. But still, doctors are afraid. They're intimidated by this, and pharmacies are intimidated by it too. But still, it's to their credit that many pharmacies are providing it anyway because there's a big demand for it, because especially MS patients in this country have united, and through the coffee shops they have begun to provide MediWheat. Bernard, former owner of Positronics, started the MediWheat initiative. A few coffee shops are still providing marijuana at half price for anyone who has a prescription. At this time, there is a coffee shop called Willie Wortel's Workshop in Haarlem on the Ramsingel, and he has formed a stichting, it's called Cannabis as Medicine. This was formed on August the 13th, and they want to be able to provide MediWheat in coffee shops. Gerrit de Zwaan is the Institute for Patients' Interest has set this up. But
Yeah, digital is definitely on.
this was talked about in the Dutch Parliament, and it was
I have a zoom up.
received with a positive
Digital.
reaction by two of the major Dutch political parties. There are about 15 parties here in the parliamentary system, and there are four major parties. Two of these parties reacted positively. The Dutch Labour Party, the PVDA, Partij van de Arbeid, and D66. But they call for more scientific research. There's another party that's become popular recently called the VVD. This is the sort of akin to the business wing of our Republican Party. And also the Christian Democrat Party, which was the major party until they lost out in the last elections. Now they fall into the opposition. These two parties particularly do not want marijuana to be provided as medicine through the coffee shops, because to them that would legitimize the coffee shops. And the CDA party wants all the coffee shops closed in any case. But there's a professor that our farm has worked with named Wei van der Sluis. He teaches pharmacology at the University of Utrecht. And he also agrees that this medical marijuana, should not go through the coffee shops, simply because of the reason that there's no consistent quality, and the risks of insecticide in the medicine and a viral infection remain a threat for the seriously ill. But he in his lectures as professor at the University of Utrecht, he does definitely talk about the medical benefits that can be supplied with marijuana. This Dutch Pharmacology Board wants to provide the drug, as I said, but they would rather supply it as in pill form and get the pills from, of course, Eli Lilly and British pharmacological companies. It makes a lot of sense to give a pill to someone who's has chronic vomiting. But this idea is also supported by the Dutch Minister of Health, Els Borst, because the way the United States has set it up, of course, the pills are legal, the synthetic THC is legal, but the plant, of course, is strictly forbidden. And this would not present any problem if the Dutch wanted to import it as a pill and give it to patients. As I understand, Hortifarm has been working on a totally a THC pill from totally natural ingredients. I'd like to see what's going to happen with that, or if anything can be. The pills don't violate international anti-narcotics treaties. Now, for about the last 2 years, there was a doctor in Dijkzicht Hospital in Rotterdam who was supplying marijuana to patients. His name was Nederland, I believe. But they forbid him to do that anymore, or he would lose his job. On September 1st this year, in the academic hospital of the University of Groningen, a professor there named J. de Keizer of the neurology department has also begun research with 15 MS patients. Because he says we have classic remedial drugs at our disposal which reduce spasticity, but after a certain period they don't work anymore. Then we're helpless. Test subjects receive 3 different doses through a mask: 0, 5, and 10 milligrams. It's a blind study, and this project only deals with the physical effects of marijuana, and they've had very positive results so far in relieving the painful muscle spasms, stiffness, and cramps, particularly at night, which is caused by this degenerative muscular disease. He says that, of course, medical research is necessary, but we prescribe thousands of drugs that have not been researched yet. Every year in the United States, many new chemicals are introduced into the environment that have not been tested at all for health effects. We've got 10,000 years of experience with marijuana. No one's ever died from it yet. And this professor says that just because we have no irrefutable scientific proof regarding the effectiveness is no reason not to prescribe it. We have 27 years of experience with the purely recreational side here in the Netherlands, and if we supply it in a controlled manner as medicine, what kind of risk is that to society? It's pretty good that he would say that. I suppose that's about, I should get off and let our Arizona friend here speak. I'm anxious to hear what he says too.
Thanks, Rick. Our last speaker on the panel, Glaucoma Jim from Arizona.
Hello, everybody. First of all, let me say thanks to Peter Gorman, High Times, and everybody for doing this. This is real important. The reason why I use the name Glaucoma Jim is sort of funny, but sort of serious. It runs in my family. My grandparents went blind, my uncles went blind. And as of February, it'll be 10 years. 8 years ago, I'm supposed to be blind. I still got my driver's license. Having a disease like glaucoma and using cannabis as medicine is very interesting. I have a prescription, I have two actually, from here in the Netherlands. I'm allergic to all the drops. They can't give me the surgery. Not only will I not let them stick a laser beam in my eye, they would explode a piece of my eye so that it would let the pressure out, when a joint would do it lower, faster, and more effectively with less danger of going blind. If I go 3 days, I will lose my sight. That's how important pot is to me. My prescription is 1 gram an hour. Living in the States, okay, and 1 gram an hour, it's rough, okay? It's interesting to know that it's so effective, and that's what scares our government. It scares our government so much that they send DEA agents in after doctors in Arizona when they write a prescription for pot for someone who's dying of cancer, brain cancer. DEA agents went to his doctor. I like to make fun of the government, okay, because they can't really bother with me. My prescription is protected by the UN treaty, okay? They don't bother me. But I'm more into the education fact. If you learn anything from me is, don't be quiet about it. You got to start spreading the news that it is medicine. It's total medicine. It's medicine for the people, and it's also medicine for our earth. Now, in Arizona, thank goodness, the voters were smart enough to okay a bill that wouldn't send pot smokers to jail anymore. Whether you're medicine, well, it's medicine for everybody. Let's start understanding that also. I mean, even if you have menstrual cramps, I don't know what it's like, but I've seen the effects and I've seen how fast it works. Now they can't tell me, oh, let's do a study on it. I'm sorry, I'm the study. I can still see. They gave me 2 years to see. And that scared me. That scared me greatly. Now it's 10 years. I can still see perfectly. I mean, you know, it's important to understand that the only medicine I use is pot. I eat it, I drink it, I smoke it, I vaporize it. I do every way you know that you can do pot, I do it. I lead a regular life, I work, when I go to work I don't smoke. I eat my cookies, or I drink my tincture. I'm an ambassador. I help tourists find restaurants and things like that, so it's pretty cool. I was on the front page of the Arizona Republic, which is a total anti-drug newspaper, Republican, you know, Dan Quayle family kind of deal. I was on the front page with my cookies. See, and the reason I do that is to show that it does work. That they can't say, well, let's wait and do studies. I'm not waiting an hour, okay? You know, and see, I really counsel patients a lot, because someone with cancer never smoked a joint in their life. You give them some bud and they go, what? You know, okay, I'll show you how to roll a joint. Watch closely, and then we'll see if you can do it. If they can't do it, I'll sit and roll them 100 joints if I have to. It's important for everybody to understand, because everybody knows 1 out of 4 people in the United States are going to die of cancer. Okay? Everybody knows somebody. You got to help those people. And it's real important to understand that you're helping them as a human. You know, it doesn't matter what country you're from. You're doing it from your heart. And that's what's important about the Dutch people. They care about their people. Okay? That politicians in the US don't give a flying you know what about me. Because I've talked to them. I've sat face to face and explained, listen, I don't want to go blind. I don't want to go on welfare. I don't want to be a burden. I want to be a benefit. And that's how, see, they tend to make pot smokers in general look in a negative light. No, we're the most beautiful, most beneficial people. We will save this earth. It's just that we all got to do it together, and we all got to be enlightened about it. You got to spread the word. And, you know, even the grandmothers and grandfathers who go to church and do their regular thing, they will have the cancer. They will have to have the pot. Now, Zofran, which is the #1 anti-throw-up medicine that they give to cancer patients, costs $123 a pill. Okay? $123 a pill. Alright? Now, you got to take 12 a day so that you can drink your Ensure, which is baby food for adults. Okay? And you still throw it up. You still throw it up. But yet, you smoke half a joint, and you want, I'll have French fries. I'll have, give me that fruit salad that I just couldn't take the smell of. See, going through cancer, chemotherapy, all your senses are so heightened that the smell of someone cooking bacon down the block will make you heave for an hour. But yet, if you smoke a joint, it doesn't bother you. Matter of fact, it smells good to you. It changes that. You know, I'm very active as far as letting people know. I'm in their face. I have a cable TV show back in Arizona. I let as many people know as possible that how effective it is as medicine. It's not a tongue-in-cheek thing. It's saving people's lives every single day. and it saves my sight every single hour. People who come here who are patients, okay, don't worry, go to the doctor, find a doctor. It's a homeopathic doctor is the way to go, okay, and there's plenty of homeopathic centers in Amsterdam, Rotterdam, where I go, and around this great country. Now, when you go there, explain to them your situation. Now, that's what the difference between going to the doctor in the U.S. and going to the doctor here is a great difference. In the U.S., you go in, they look at your paperwork, say, oh, you have glaucoma, that's too bad. Oh, I see you're allergic to all these drops that I'm about to give you. Yeah, no, I can't take them either. Anaphylactic shock is not the way I want to die. So I use medicine. I use pot as medicine, marijuana, and then I get well, thank you very much. I don't need you as a patient. Okay, now, come here, go to my doctor, sit down, and he asks me how I am. How do I feel? And then he goes, what did you come to see me about? And I say, I have glaucoma, it runs in my family, I don't want to go blind. And he goes, okay, what do you use? And I say, marijuana. He goes, how much do you need? That's what he said. I cried. I'm serious. I started to cry. I wept. I said, doctor, you don't understand what a long trip this has been to come and see you. See, Todd McCormick is my benefactor. I'm the second patient that went to Todd's doctor. And I've been bringing patients to the same doctor ever since.
Look on your machine.
So now there's 14 people in Arizona with prescriptions that are protected by the UN Charter. So, I perpetuate this. But what I ask of everybody here is get to know somebody who's hurting and needs help. I mean, even if it's to go over there and burn a joint with them once in a while, because it's a very isolating kind of thing. You have to hide. When you have to smoke a gram an hour and you have to worry about the police, I mean, it's a terrible, terrible thing. See, you always have to worry about the police because 1, they'll take my medicine away, 2, they'll put me in a cell for more than 3 hours, okay? After 3 hours, I'm throwing up. All right? It's nothing that I want to deal with, but that's why I'm so out there, because if it does happen, I have everybody who know about it. Thanks, everybody.
I apologize for asking Jim to stop his remarks because he's fascinating. But I only got about a minute and a half left. I promised you questions. Well, it turns out I was lying. Because the 420 Council starts here in about 2 minutes. I will say for the press, or those who actually might have some questions that maybe some of us could answer, the press can meet us probably out in the hallway if anybody wanted to interview Art or any of us. And in terms of individuals, by all means, we'll be outside for a few minutes. But we've only got 2 minutes to clear this room for the 420. So thanks for coming to the seminar today, gang. Thanks a lot.
They're selling stuff on the outside too, made in prisons. It's basically, we're no different than the Chinese.
Oh, no. In fact, if you get right down to it, if you consider our marijuana people to be our dissidents, we have more dissidents locked up than they do.
Oh yeah, we have, what, 750,000
Something
all
like that.
levels?
Yeah, something like that.
And to me, it's like, that's not very productive, yet we're letting out child molesters, rapists, murderers.
Absolutely. The big famous cases you read about in the paper, the guy that got polyclass was one who got let out to keep some college student in jail for dope.
Yeah.
And the guy that cut the girl's arms off was another one who was let out to keep some college student in jail for dope, you know? That's the kind of people that are being let out while they're keeping young people in jail up
So
doing
it's
hard
like,
time.
our priorities are all wrong, and finally in our state, in California, we're starting to realize that we cannot afford to throw people in jail for small amounts of drugs, because most of these are small-time dealers, nickel and dime, when it could be they can educate them, get them a regular job, to have them get part of the system.
Yeah.
Because too often our schools are failures, and kids don't know, they don't learn anything.
I'm glad you brought us back to
Thank you
that
very
point.
much.
Thank you.